This is Rule Engines for Charts and Poetry. Hi, I am Ada. I have 5 years experience writing Clojure and Clojurescript. I am a poet from Trinidad and Tobago. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the founder CEO of Giant Heart Poetry. But before we get to the poems, our story today begins with charts. In particular, coronavirus charts. At the start of the pandemic, I realized that we needed to make an invisible threat visible. And the way that we did that was through data analytics and journalism. However, I realized that our local newspapers did not have resources comparable to international data analytics teams, where they could make live updating dashboards and embedded charts, for example. And so I thought that I could help, and I came up with a plan in order to make a standard method for reading data from different sources. So even as new sources come in, the system should be able to gracefully accept it. Give newsrooms the ability to quickly build data dashboards, whatever their particular requirements are, whatever um, and whatever country they're from. And finally, to give performance embedding across multiple websites, whichever type of website it is, we should be able to like adapt. And with all of this uncertainty, I turned to a rule engine. And rule engines are tools for managing state and organizing logic. It works by taking a set of facts and then inserting it into a rule session where some calculation and rules will run that can create new facts. And then we query that session to produce data. And we can use that data for visualization and creating charts, for example. And what I think the real power in a rule engine is that these facts could come from different sources over time, and the rule session actually doesn't care. The rules within the session that does the computation, it doesn't care where the facts are coming from, just as long as the facts meet certain criteria, the rules would trigger and do the calculations. And likewise, the querying to produce the data and like generate the charts, they don't care about any of the rules within the session or any of the logic going on. As long as there are facts within the session that meet the criteria of the query will return the data. And so, with this in mind, our solution then becomes we read data by inserting new facts into the session. The analytics would be conducted by generic rules, and then the charts would be generated by querying the session. So that is on this is a solution from like a product perspective. But of course, there are people involved, and I hope to make this an open source project. And when there are people involved, we need to like think about organizing around the code, right? And so, you know the joke that's like, if you show me your code base, I will show you your org chart. Like, This is this is what a code base built around rule engines wants to look like. And as you can see, they're like neat divisions between people or teams. Um, so, for example, like you can have a research person and they only care about their little box. As long as they like know how to just insert into the rule session, they don't actually need to know about any of the logic that's going on. And even if they're inserting in a form, even if they're inserting in a form that's not like 100% appropriate for the rules can do like processing on their end. Um, but the crucial thing in this organization is that none of the themes really need knowledge of the others because by default, rule engines have a sense of good isolation where you only need to understand a small part of the code base in order to contribute, which makes it like easier for onboarding. And it's easier to replace and improve components. Because, for example, if someone codes a bit of analytics and it runs slow at first, but it reads the appropriate data and produces the appropriate data. It has a clear pathway to replacing that rule with a more performant implementation. And the people who are inserting the facts don't need to know about it. And the consumers who are generating the visualizations also don't need to know about it. And all of this is theoretically wonderful. So, what happened? Well, at first, there was success. There was success. 27 days after the pandemic was declared, I had a server running that could read from an external API, generate charts, and provide every country with a URL that linked to their data. A lot of work, but I mean, it worked, right? But, but as always, you need more than code. And although like I had all these nice ideas and I built this nice project and deployed it and shared it to other programmers, when it came to actually sharing it with the newsrooms, I was afraid, I was scared, and ultimately I let that fear and that feeling of unsafety like keep me from helping. Um, that's just how it is. Like if you don't, I could have been braver, but at the same time, if you don't create like safe environments, you don't know what you're missing. And so, fast forward a couple months, maybe even a year, and I am like burnt out. One of the things that contribute to burnout generally is a sense of not just working hard, but working hard and not having an impact. And that is exactly how I felt. So at this time in my life, I turned back to writing poetry. I had been a poet for most of my life. I performed in the competitions and like for my friends and just as a hobby. Like it's great. I love it. But I hadn't written poetry in a while. And so at this time, when I was under some stress, I turned to writing poetry again. But the thing about me is that I write very slowly. When I would be performing at open mics in the past, I would write like two, maybe three poems a year. I would take months just like thinking and reviewing and like practicing the performance, and it would just take forever. But I knew at this point in time, I I wanted to make writing more of a everyday practice, and so I came up with this strategy. I would have a bunch of poetry prompts, and every day I would just like take some prompts and write some poems. So as you can see, I took this like two printed pages and I wrote down a bunch of words and a bunch of like poetic images as like the concepts. And then every day, I would just roll a die or just like look around and like pick two words, and then I would write some poems. And it worked. Um, it worked. It was really good. I made it part of my like daily routine, and eventually, of course, I started to code because building is good for the soul. Like it just is. So in the mornings, I would write poetry, and in the evenings, I started to build a website. And the website ended up looking like this. You can like preview it at the like link over there. But the important thing is that every day this website would update with new poetry prompts, just like I was doing from my paper. And of course, when I was making this website, I used a rule engine because rule engines are fun. Like they're just fun tools to work with. And like not just rule engines are fun, but like Clojure makes it fun to use them because like the set of abstractions that underlie the rule engine that I'm using are just like simple maps and vectors. Like it, the language doesn't like get in the way of exploring the programming concept of a rule engine, and that is something that like I've always appreciated about Clojure, and like one of my favorite things. This idea that like you can explore new ideas because most libraries just use a simple set of abstractions that you're already familiar with. So you can focus on the programming concept and not be like trying to learn like a whole new class hierarchy or object whatever's that I've experienced in other languages. So I have this idea. I'm like, I want to make this website to display prompts. I know I'm going to use a rule engine. Like I have this research that I did when I was making the charting library. So how do I do it? Well, I start by making a big JSON file. I just started typing and I typed up all the prompts from the paper into like this JSON structure. It looked something like this. And like no SQL was used, but I think I got a simple database. And so on the page load, when you load into the page, it just went and like downloaded this JSON file and used it in the program. And if you remember how a rule engine works, is that it reads facts into a session and then queries to produce data. So when the page loads, it would read the JSON file, have the facts in as facts in the session, do some calculation and rules with fire, to figure out what today's prompt was going to be. And then it would query and render a page that looked like this, where you had two poetry prompts, thunderstorm and desire, for that day. But um like we spoke about earlier, the thing that I really attracted me to the rule engine was this idea of being able to like easily switch out components and change how the visualizations are done without like changing the logic too much or the data ingest. And so this is the first version. I was able to easily and eventually make a second version where it's the same thing. We're reading the prompts, but instead of just like displaying them, you press a button and they would insert a poetry prompt into a text area that you can type in. So it was like a little scratch pad. You would like type, "This is my idea for a poem," and then you would like press the emotion button, and it would give you an emotion. As like maybe you like talk about your idea in the context of this emotion. Um, so like I was able to like easily change the visualization of the underlying data through using just a different rendering function. And so this is the second version. You can test it out at the domain below. And right now, I am on the third version of this same idea using the same. I haven't touched the initial reading of the prompts code or anything like that. Um, but this is the third version, and how this works is that you press the button and it renders a prompt as a button, like another button, and you can click on the prompt and make it disappear. So like it's like a really like fun and like flexible way of like exploring ideas. You click around, put a bunch of prompts on your screen, and then you like delete the ones that you don't want, and then you like start writing your poem with the ones that you do. And so I'm like writing all this code and like thinking about poetry. But like what is it all about? And it turns out that the problem that I was thinking about was writer's block. And writer's block is the condition of being unable to think about what to write or how to proceed with writing. In my research, I found that the writing process is really based on one, inspiration, followed by two, creation, and ending with three, review. As you can see with the poetry prompts, we already have like the inspiration part, like some manifestation of it, so that the program could already help you with the first step in the writing process, getting you inspired. So now we started, I started to think about creation. And in writing poetry, one of the types of poems that I frequently write is called a haiku. And the haiku is a form of poetry originating in Japan. It is based around three phases that follow a pattern of five, then seven, then five syllables. The syllable, if you don't remember, is a unit of pronunciation forming the whole or part of a word. So, for example, hello has two syllables. Hello. Beautiful has three. So, if you want to put it together, This is an example of a haiku that I wrote. A cool draft wakes me, and I know I'm not alone. Soon we will be wind. Five, then seven, then five. Yeah. Um, so I'm thinking about creating and just want to emphasize that like building is good for the soul. This is fun. This was like nourishing to be thinking about a domain that I love and that I'm interested in and that like I care about and that my friends care about and my community cares about. It was just like a wonderful experience. And eventually I ended up with a text editor for writing poems. And as you can see in the bottom there, one of the features is that we have live updating syllable counts. So like when you're writing your haiku, you don't need to be like keep double checking and counting in your head. As you type, you can see how many syllables there are in the line that you're writing. So this was like some of the tools that I made to help with the creation process. And now what about the review? Well, the main feature that I made when thinking about how do we review our writing is that I added the ability to create multiple drafts. So like you write your poem and then like saying, what if I can try another way? And you just press the new draft button and then like another flower pops up and you can click on it and then you write another version of the poem that you're thinking about. So that like helps you with reviewing. And something that I want to like emphasize in this whole process is that there was a real sense of curiosity. And I feel like the system really supported my curiosity. Like I was able to easily try new things and experiment with features without being afraid that like I'll end up with like a big tangled mess. Because ultimately I wasn't like directly responsible for organizing the code base. I was just like doing little pieces at a time, inserting my facts, writing my rules, querying to render. Um, and like the like day to day of like how the components like connected to each other, I didn't, I just didn't think about it. And so like that is how like I feel like it really supported my curiosity. And like when it comes to like teams, I wasn't thinking about like how would 10 developers work on a code base at the same time, but I was thinking about how one developer would work on the code base over time. So like I worked on this project over 2 years. Um and like there will be months in between where I didn't write any code and I just like used it as a product, writing poems. I wrote like 100 poems. I like wrote like a whole book. I'm trying to get it published. It's a whole thing. It's super cool. Um, but yeah, one developer over time, like I was like collaborating with the past versions of myself. And I never like there was never like a period where like I like went back into the code base and I felt like too lost, you know? Like it always like because like when you're writing you don't need to like understand the whole how everything works. You don't need to think about how everything works to work on your new feature or like fix your bug. That like it felt really comfortable. And like speaking about development, let's get into the code just a little bit. Um, the library that I recommend for using rule engines in Clojure is called O'Doyle Rules. O'Doyle Rules. Here's a link to it. Um, the docs are amazing. The person who created it is honestly iconic. Icon. No notes. Brilliant. Um, and it was actually funded by Clojurists together. So like shout out to them like supporting the good work. And I recommend that you read the docs and like search on YouTube for Doyle Rules Closure, and you will see like some videos there, like going through tutorials and stuff by the person who created the rule engine. So I'm not gonna like go too deep into the code today, but I just want to like remind you how it works. Like you read facts into a session, and then rules act on the facts that you have read into the session, and then you query to get data out. However, there is like a very important thing that it took me way too long to like appreciate and learn, and I just want to share it with you today. And it is that all rules are also queries. So, for example, if we have a rule called syllables, that whenever a fact is inserted in the session that is a text, a line of poetry, then calculate the number of syllables for that line of poetry, right? But because all rules are also queries, this means that we can just query our live session from the REPL and see exactly which facts have triggered that rule. So we can like, one of the concerns that I had and that you may have when thinking about considering rule engines is that it could be a little bit of a black box where like you put stuff into the session and then like magic happens and like stuff comes out. But like being able to query rules like this adds like a serious level of observability. And like with this, it means that like you can you can like very easily experiment on like the state of your running program without like having to guess as to like what's going on. So although the rule session is like managing all of this state for you, you have like this facility and it's a very easy option of like going in and seeing what that state actually is. So we can still like do all like fun REPL driven development things, even though we're using a rule engine to manage most of our state for us. And yeah, that is all the code I'm gonna show for you today. And so our next steps are: one, go read the docs, give it a try. Highly recommended. And two, here's a link to my GitHub where you can see the code for the coronavirus charts, as well as a starter project for a single page Clojurescript application using the Doyle rules. Um, the starter project should be compatible with GitHub code spaces. So even if you don't have a development environment configured on your computer just yet, you can just like click on the green button and open a code space, and it should like load up with all the dependencies that you need installed already. And yeah, you can email me at hi@giantheart.co or follow me on Twitter at Rainbow Bamboo. If you know Twitter still exists. And thank you. It has been my pleasure being here. Um, like these conference talks have been like a crucial part of my education. So I am delighted to be able to contribute in my small way. And also shout out to the organizations, to the organizers for like putting this together and like helping me prepare the talk. And I hope to see you soon. Reach out to me, email, Discord. Bye.